my name is Noyonika Dutta. I'm a third year English and Media Studies major, and it is an absolute honor for me to interview you guys today. I'm a little nervous, so forgive me if I started a little. But yeah, so let's start. Would you like to introduce yourselves to the people who'll be watching the podcast/episode?
My name is Chiki Sarkar. I'm a publisher and I run a company called Juggernaut Books.
My name's Samit Basu. I'm a novelist mainly. I also work in other media and have for far too long.
So, you've been around First Word for a while now. So, I wanted to ask this question because it really intrigued me. With so many new writers entering this field and younger voices finally pushing different kinds of stories, how do you see the definition of a good story evolving around Indian audiences today?
I think it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, which means that, a great story is a great story. Talent is talent. And I don't know whether it needs a certain, maybe there are moments when you see more sort of great talent emerging at a certain time and place. But on the whole, this is not that moment as it happens, I think, in India, but it is a moment, just like any moments, where there's interesting voices, less interesting voices, some good books, some not so good books, as it would happen virtually any time in life and in history. And how do I think things have changed? Nothing has really changed, especially. What typically tends to change over sort of, I think, over 10-year phases is types of stories tend to rise to the fore. I'm just trying to give you, I'm just trying to think of, okay, for example, there was a period in, Indian fiction writing that you had to write the great Indian novel. You had to write these big, epic novels that were like, door stoppers, and that somehow defined the nation in some form, right? Now, where did that sense of ambition to write the big, epic book come out from? I don't know. I'm sure like if we were sitting with some academics and historians and it was dissected, there would be some answers. But I don't even know. I'm not sure I sufficiently can tell what this moment is and what its trend is. One largely big trend in publishing, I would say, that has happened in the last 10 years, and it's happened in part due to efforts of an Ashoka University teacher / professor is Arunava Sinha, which is that for publishers and for readers and for juries who are awarding prizes in India, so the apparatus of literary culture, writing in translation is now the mainstream. So this has been, if you ask me, one of the biggest shifts in fiction writing. Non-fiction is distinct and by itself, but in fiction writing in the last 10 years, what has been the biggest change that I've seen as a publisher, I've seen as a reader, is that, if you are a great writer in Tamil or Telugu or Kannada or Bengali or Hindi, you will not just be published, but you'll be published with care. You will get well reviewed. You will get shortlisted for prizes. And as we're seeing, you're also winning prizes abroad. And by getting that international recognition, it means that you become bestsellers in your own country, which means people are buying those books. So that to me is really like, I think there are some problems with it, which that's for another conversation, but it's amazing. It's really amazing that, if you look at a Crossword Fiction Prize or any of the, JCB, there was a big fiction prize, which no longer sadly exists, but at least 50% of that list would have been a writing in translation. This would not have happened, Samit, right, when you began your career as a writer. So that would be, if you ask me, a big picture trend that I could. There are many other micro trends that I'm not a deep enough reader of contemporary Indian fiction as much as I used to be. But this would be my one big thing.
Yeah, in agreement with all of this, and I think what's the biggest change I've seen over the last 2 decades is while some things do not change in the sense that people will keep reading, people will keep thinking that enough people aren't reading. Publishing will, despite everything, keep growing somehow. The exact nature of what people are reading keeps, shifting here and there and requires a lot of tracking. I think one thing that is fundamentally changing is that the awareness of how subjective reading is, and how you know what quality means to different people, and what is good, where that definition comes from, the medium in which people are doing their reading, right? Whether it's Wattpad, or whether people think they're not readers, but they're actually consuming a huge amount of text somewhere or other, right? So so the algorithm age is a shift. It is a very unrecognizable landscape, just in terms of how people are spending their days. At what time do they read books? What books do they read? How do they consume the text that they do consume? So that's been a change, but it feels like a fluctuation. I think there are some books that just stay, that will be around for decades longer. There are other really good books that come and disappear. More and more people aren't really aware where they get their information and recommendations for books to read in the algorithm age, right? So, like with everything else, the way that we receive information is fragmented. The way that taste spreads, the way that different taste groups interact with one another, that's shifting. But in terms of if do people still read the books they like and love the books they read, if they find them good, that's not changed, and that probably won't, right? I was reading this, I don't know whether it was Aristotle or Socrates, but somewhere in that before last year era, whoever that was, whichever of these two dudes it was lamenting that the kids weren't reading enough. Right? So that's something that hasn't changed. Yeah.
So you mentioned how there's a shift in the landscape when it comes to reading today, and how we're all reading, no matter how much we say that, whether it's through Wattpad, or if you're reading actual novels or just short stories. So as a writer, do you think it's more about writing to what people already want to read, or nudging the audience towards stories that they might not know but want to know?
I have no control over what people like to read, and increasingly I have no awareness of what people like to read. So I write what I enjoy writing, right? If people like it, I feel very lucky, and I feel like I'm completely on the ball and on the pulse of what people want and what they need. I might not be, right? So people can write and publish and look at data and trends and taste with the best intentions, but with any of the arts or media landscapes, no one really knows what people want, because there's 18,000 variables going into everything, right? Over time we become experts in some way, and so we can make good guesses. I personally don't give a shit what the audience wants, and I'm fortunate that there's been enough of an overlap between what I like doing, and enough people have liked it as well for me to keep doing this, which is something that I do want. Now, obviously, a publisher's take on this would be very different, because it's, there is that you want to produce art, but you're also running a business aspect of things.
So, I mean, what I would add to that is, these conversations really depend on the kind of book we're talking about. So, when a publisher publishes, some books are what you would call genre books, romance books, crime books. Often you can then game those. For example, there's this new trend, right, on romanticides. So what that means is it's out there, it's hip. So I'm sure romance editors are calling their authors and saying, come on, give me romanticides, right? Because this is what the market wants. You never end up having those conversations with a writer who writes literary fiction, for example. And you typically don't have conversations like that with a lot of serious nonfiction writers, either a serious historian. On the other hand, in Juggernaut, and I think in many other companies, we're largely a nonfiction house. We will commission subjects that are of the moment in nonfiction. For example, you might commission a big book on the Indo-US relationship because of Trump and tariffs, right? Because it's in the air. Or you might, I remember in the early days in Juggernaut, we commissioned a lot of history because BJP was doing these big campaigns against Tipu Sultan and all of that. So we just thought, oh, there's a real place here to do well-researched, well-told, easy, accessible histories of these guys, done short, written, of course, by people whose politics are not adjacent to BJP and who are researchers, so fact-based. And we publish them. So that you can do publishing that's response to stuff that's happening, but it's also harder. But on genre, you certainly can, and people do. So I am sure, as I said, romanticy, there are people. I remember, for example, suddenly like coloring books were trendy. Everyone was doing coloring books, and we never did it. But I'm sure all the publishers were having conversations like, "Oh, shall we do a special? I don't know, Devdutt Patnaik coloring book and whatever coloring book." And so it's what I'm trying to say is that I think that conversation happens with a certain kind of writer, writing a certain kind of book. But because publishing, so for example, a business book writer, you might say to call someone, say, listen, we do need that book on Adani. Just like he's such a big pivotal figure. We're hearing him in polarizing ways in the news all the time. Who is this man? We don't have the one, which actually I really think we don't have the one single account that does not just like hates him and not just overloves him, but like really tells the story fairly. And we will have that conversation regularly in Juggernaut. So, so I don't know whether that helps you answer it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was okay. A lot to think about. Okay. I had a follow-up question, but I believe you kind of answered it, so I'll move on. So, Mr. Basu, you've been writing for quite some time now, and your work has seen Indian publishing through many phases. So, do you ever feel that speculative fiction from here still gets trapped in certain expectations, sometimes being judged as too Indian for global readership, or at other times not Indian enough for a local one?
It's not. It's none of these spaces are monoliths, right? So, I think I've had 4 books now that have traveled, and they're read differently in India and in the West. But you can't, these genres in themselves are quite fluid. Trends come and go. They're also umbrellas, right? Like so, romanticy, which Chiki brought up right now, is one of, let's say, 30 subgenres under fantasy. All of these are in flux. Many of them don't work in India at all, or don't even come to India at all. So you don't really make, if you're writing within spaces, and what happens in India is that writers often get trapped in these definitions, because I don't think genre means anything in India in particular, because we're very used to a glut of things. So it's a correct and applicable term for publishers to use when they're moving, when they're categorizing things or when they're building their kind of portfolio of books overall. But the who the audiences are, what they like, is all very undiscovered ground in India. So you kind of publish and you see what happens, right? Or you write and you see what happens. So
and Samit, I can interject and actually say that speculative fiction, all of that largely hasn't worked in India, right? It's not a genre that is. So let me give you an example. In China, you take something like the 3-body problem. That author was like, I can't remember his name now. It's kind of a great book, but
Cixin Liu.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
And he was like the Chetan Bhagat of China, right? Then, of course, it got turned into a big blockbuster TV show. I think there's going to be a film. Obama picked it as one of his summer reads, blah, blah, blah. That we for whatever reason, some people argue that it's because of the supremacy of mythological writing in India is so high that other forms of like imaginative thinking has never taken off. Like we don't have a sci-fi Amish, right, in India.
Thank God.
No, but you know what I mean, like a popular, or take the 3-body problem, which is a hokey book in all kinds of ways, right?
But reverse interject there, and
sorry, I've just taken over. But
without. So it's interesting. So Amish, for example, right? Um, there's, let's say, an intersection between government, religion. There's a push, let's say, for a
But
certain
not,
kind of
you know,
writing,
Amish was
right?
writing pre-BJP, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying Amish specifically, right? But similarly, the, let's say, the cultural trend machinery of whatever ambiguous origin, um, in India, um, helped Amish and a number of people. There was a nice intersection with what, say, a vast majority of people who were new to reading were interested in at the time. Just as there was with Chetan a few years ago, with the kind of neoliberal corporate, um, these are my interests, these are my aspirations. I'm a small town guy. Who represents me in a way that, say, Arundhati Roy or Salman Rushdie never could. Chetan did, right, in his time. Similarly, for the three body problem, it's a very interesting example that you brought up, because the kind of cultural machinery of China, with its we are a nation of science, we are it. So there's a huge proliferation of these massive, incredibly well-funded universities in China, where science fiction is what
They
those
read.
universities are about, right?
What does that mean? Like
So, just as part of their fundamental cultural branding, at
Okay.
exactly the time that the Three Body Problem and other writers like Shia, Jia, and two or three others, the folding Beijing guy, so there's a whole cultural movement of which this was the pinnacle, and it's very much what that country was both saying about itself and interested in, with a huge amount of infrastructure behind it at the
Okay.
time, right? So without, so which kind of
I get what
broadly
you're saying.
overlaps with, and again, this is not even to criticize Amish. I'm saying
Yeah.
people are off their time and
Yeah.
off their place, right? So none of this tracks at all with, say, a Western definition of speculative fiction and the publishing categories that it goes into, right? So culture is complex. At any point of time, society, politics, multiple intersecting trends, money, media. So when any of us, when it's publishers, writers, journalists, academics, we only see things through the lens through which we are able to see them, with the information that we are allowed to have access to, right? And often the same period in retrospect seen through another lens will look completely different. So I don't disagree with anything Chiki said, right? It's just that our
Samit
lenses
is so
are.
nice, right?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just saying Samit is so nice, right?
No, but I actually don't. I'm not. Yeah, this is not to be nice. I actually don't disagree with anything you said. But yeah, it's my lens is not radically different. But again, this is something that I've had to think about obsessively,
Yes, of course.
and specifically for last time. But to take your example, like in a slightly different space, Indian crime has exploded on Netflix, but I don't know whether it's exploded in books,
No,
right?
totally not.
Because, like, say,
But has Indian crime exploded on Netflix?
oh yeah, they don't want to make anything else. Like,
But
I've
which
been-
ones, like that Black Warrant type stuff?
Black Walnut is new, but there's been think of any like very authentic Indian accent. There's a crime show in it. The one of the, who was it, Reliance type producers was telling me, do you have a crime? I was like, no. Do you have a serial killer? I was like, no, I have none of these. Like, we want one. Right? So that's so you couldn't. So I was in the peak streaming before the bubble popped. I was in those offices. They were like roaming around looking for crime things. Anything will do. Do you have a serial killer? Was a question that people were accosted with. So like, you don't doing crime. Do you have dog movie, dance movie? I have none of these. That's not. So yeah. So it's yeah. But and Indian crime is a good example, because it's not like there aren't good books.
No, but there aren't really good books.
Yeah, but
There isn't. There isn't. I mean, and I read crime. And I don't think there is an
Fair, but,
Indian book that like compares to.
But you need a lot
and I
of-
read like popular best-selling international crime books on a regular basis.
yeah, but there's, I don't know. I mean, even when it comes, right?
Will we know?
Let's say someone writes a genius crime novel out of India. It's hit or miss whether it
Yeah,
will be
you're right.
successful.
You're right.
Like, that's
You're
not for-
totally right.
Yeah.
To push this further, do you think that because of social media and because of all these streaming platforms, do you think it has made readers more adventurous? Or do you think that it has narrowed their taste towards the same trending titles of how you mentioned Netflix is always trying to look for crime thrillers.
No, so a couple of things. I think that what streaming does is doesn't change reading. It just means people stop reading. So it doesn't. And actually, what the point Samit was making, that there seems to be popular genres on film that are doing very well, like crime. That does not mean that we're seeing popular crime books. And actually, using that as an example, take a few other things. Horror films do well. Wasn't there that three that
Yeah,
franchise?
that's
We've
horror.
never managed to make horror work in India. There isn't the successful horror book. Now, two films that I've been wanting to watch and I haven't. You know that film Kantara? And then there's that Indian superhero film from Kerala. Have you heard about this? Like a girl superhero,
The new one.
which is just
I forgot the name, but there's a new one. Yeah.
apparently it's really quite interesting and good, right? And you think, wow, great concepts, girl superhero. Kantara kind of just apparently, not that I've seen it, but it seems to do like crime and horror and mythology.
I've seen it.
Sort
It's,
of.
it's
Is
actually,
it good?
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
But somehow we haven't seen. So what people are, it's not just on Netflix. I mean, for example, podcasts will tell you that ghost stories, audio podcast ghost stories, do fabulously well, right? We've never managed to make. No publisher has had a hit ghost story, right?
In English, though.
In
right?
English, but
It's thriving in the other
I
stuff.
have a thesis which it's totally like I don't have data for it, but my thesis is that people are reading less in the languages than they are in English. And because from what I I am not an expert, and so if someone can out argue me this with data, and I'm willing to be, because this is only pure intuition, really, really not backed by. But my instinct tells me that one of the things I keep hearing is that vernacular, like language studies. So, for example, people in small towns read less well in their languages. They're not able to handle their own the regional languages properly. So what that means is that I think the writing and reading in those countries. I'm not saying like there are great publishers in local languages. There's a publisher like DC Books in Kerala who does amazing work.
Yeah.
But that's sort of my sense. That if there is serious reading happening in this country, I would love to be argued wrong, and I think in certain pockets like Tamil Nadu or something, I'm sure that this is not the case, but it is more happening in English than it is happening in regional languages because of just low education levels, people, I don't know, aspirations, what they're doing, and they're not reading like necessarily like well in their own languages. Anyway,
Yeah, it's also genuinely challenging in India because you don't get good data.
yeah,
Even if you
I
wanted,
think a
if you wanted
language
specific,
publisher would have.
yeah, but it's the gray market is a huge thing. Like
Yeah.
it's very hard. You couldn't say bring me the data to someone. They wouldn't be able to bring you reliable data. So
Yeah,
which is
fair
why
enough, fair enough.
for decades everyone is just, even experts, industry experts, everyone's making estimates, right? Because between a lot of what's happening in distribution, what's happening in piracy, what are the actual numbers of anything being sold, I mean, I'm guessing there's more reliable data coming in post the digitization of everything, but it's still, a lot of it is guesswork.
Can I know we have to close up, but can I finish with a really shocking fact that I think is like a shocking scandal that we don't talk about more, but everyone in publishing knows and is really upset by it? That Amazon is actually now the site of piracy. If you went to Amazon to purchase a book, particularly a very, very top-selling book, there is a strong chance that you will have purchased from Amazon, so legitimately, a pirated book. And to me, it's like extraordinary that like a place like and Amazon has no legal liability because it is an open marketplace, right? So what Amazon or a Flipkart or anyone will say, no, but we are an open marketplace. Anyone can come and sell anything. But as a result, they are the largest hive for piracy in this country, and for a large publisher, Juggernaut has far less books in those bestseller categories. A CEO of any large publisher in India will tell you that they lose 30% of their sales to piracy in Amazon. It's like extraordinary to me. It's just shocking. Like one day I truly think this is like a scandal, because we think of Amazon as this respectable place. I mean, I use it every day. And I just find it shocking that there would be a place for they're stealing the livelihoods of writers and publishers with total, like, there's no impunity, right? Because they're legally, like, not liable.
And for a writer, if you get, like, the biggest prestige thing is if you get pirated in print.
So Samit actually wants that. Just as I'm like, oh my god, Samit's like, pirate me on Amazon. Now I've arrived.
Yeah, no,
Right?
obviously I don't love it, but but that's the biggest prestige thing. Like if your book's being pirated, then you know that okay, there's a shot. I should do another one. Someone's heard of me.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. This was lovely. I actually did not know anything about Amazon, of how it is exploiting. This is really a fresh take. Honestly, I did not know.
This is making you more or less.
Get everyone
stunning.
excited about this. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's just absolutely shocking.
Thank you so much. Okay.